Thanks for being here today. And first, I'd like to say thank you to Professor Flynn for inviting me to exhibit at Holy Family. And it's a pleasure to be here and to share my exhibit with you. So, what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about content and context and just sort of walk through the gallery. And a little bit about myself. If I were to ask to describe my background, I would say primarily an art educator. I come from both private and public schools in Jersey, 30 years a teacher, kindergarten through undergraduates. And so those of you, if it's at a show of hands, is anyone an art ed major? Anyone majoring in that? No. Oops, I'm not hearing. Let me see. Let me see. I'm not hearing voices.
Very quiet.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I can hear you. Well, that being said, as an art educator, you do it all, drawing, printing, photography. And on that journey, towards the end of my undergraduate career, I took ceramics because you were required to take, quote, a craft. And with that, I really fell in love with it. So, 3 years into my first teaching position, I went and started my master's with a ceramic concentration, still art education. Um, and so that's where my frame of reference as my art practice developed uh, throughout the years that again I was an art teacher and a practicing artist. So kind of walking through the gallery, I know you're all sitting there, but walking through um, if you look at the very first piece that I think you come across is um, Quarantined, and it's a photograph of it's a large life-size Madonna in a convent. And during COVID, of course, I did a lot of walking and in my neighborhood, in my town, and you kind of looked at it a little bit closer and a little bit longer than I had in the past, and kind of an interesting sort of the content of it is that we were all quarantined. Mary's quarantined in the convent, but also the context is I went to that Catholic school as a child, and the nuns lived in the convent, and it was kind of a mystery place. It was like a place where the nuns came out and taught you, or they went back at school. So Quarantine is the first piece that you'll see in the gallery in the hallway. But the next piece is called Heroes, and a lot of my work is it's personal, it's reflective, and I think it's universal in its appeal because I think all people have um, memories, they have opinions, we all have a commonality. So I think my work is like universal in its approach. So Heroes, as you see, are two weeble wobble people placed inside of what used to be, I don't think many people use them today, but the soft-boiled egg holders, which were kind of a popular thing at the end of the 50s, early 60s. And I've placed them on two chairs, but I'm kind of thinking of today's social media and who our heroes are. They're called influencers, growing up with first black and white TV and then the big revolution of color TV. It was still like kind of a family thing. There was like probably one TV in most homes, and that was kind of your window to the outside world. So the heroes in that particular piece are, things that I would have been exposed to as a young child. And then also gender comes into play because gender identity was so defined, what girls like and what boys like. And so it's a counterbalance of the types of things that a youngster would see in TV in the early 60s. So for every female character or cartoon, there's a male. So again, it's reflective. the content is the social media of the day, and the um, the next piece I think that you see is probably, let me take a look, is Untitled. And it's a large urn. It's earthenware. It's thrown. And on the top of the piece is a small, what I would say like a colonial woman. And the reasoning again is it's personal, yet it also goes further into society. Um, I kept her untitled, and I've been thinking of a title for her because she's a fairly new piece, 2023. And I'm thinking A Woman Needs a Place of Her Own, if you're familiar with the writings of Virginia Woolf. And what do we mean by a woman needs a place of her own? Sure, we all need our own space, we all need our own time, but I think we can take it a step further. And if I could kind of interpret Virginia Woolf, um, that a woman needs a place in society. She needs a place of her own and her own worth in society. So I'm thinking I probably will switch up that title to A Place of Her Own rather than Untitled. Um, it kind of also uses, it's reminiscent of a Romanesque vase. And so we're looking back at antiquity and the changes in society. So that's the next piece I think that you're seeing in the gallery. Following up on that, I'm looking, let's see. I think you're looking at hmm, Sins of Omission. Oh, and oh my, I just lost them. Oh, there you are. My apologies. My cat Figaro just walked across the keyboard. So there you have it. And now you're back again. Um, so anyways, Sins of Omission. And it's the three Raku pieces right on the wall. And they're fairly new. I've been working with Raku pottery, which is really a Korean Japanese method of firing. And it's done in a reduction kiln, meaning it's robbed of oxygen, and that's where the crackle comes from. I've been thinking of Sins of Omission because I'm bothered by a lot of things, as I'm sure most of us are bothered by a lot of things, whether it's traffic on the way to work and the aggression we see on our highways, or a blatant disregard for respect of others. And so, harking back to my childhood and my Catholic upbringing, right, there was the sins of omission. Excuse me. So, yeah, consumerism, wild consumerism, um, and different social topics of that nature. So that's where that piece is coming from. It's a little bit more a social commentary, which I tend to make. And next to that piece, you'll see, again, Raku pottery. And I like to work in series. So these are different pieces from series. The I Can't Breathe, I was sitting at the wheel, just kind of warming up, because it had been a while since I had thrown. And the radio was on, and I had heard the story of Eric Gardner in Staten Island, who lost his life to police over interaction by selling loose cigarettes at a bodega. We heard it, and it was harked back again. Excuse me. Um, and that was again with George Floyd. So history does tend to repeat itself. I like to make connections between the past and the present. And as we walk through the gallery, you'll see those connections. And the other two pieces with I Can't Breathe are also two in a series of six. And on those, I've put the citizens that have succumbed to violence through, shall we say, overzealous police action. And so the victims of that are stamped along the top of the urns, and the names of the police officers are on the bottom. The next piece is called Time Out. And again, it's like harking back to my childhood and a lot of limericks. And before you'd start a game, you might say you would do picking who gets on what side of tug of war or jump rope, playground games. But it's like my mother punched your mother in the nose. And then you would say, what color did she bleed? And you would say blue or red or green. And that's how you would go around and pick who gets on to what team. It finally would end up that way. So Time Out, a double-edged sword, sort of. I think like we all need to take a time out and think a little bit. And the limerick of, my mother punched your mother in the nose, and it's red. And so I put the red chess piece on the plate. So again, a connection from the past to the present. I think the next piece that's in the gallery that you would be looking at, I call it Amour, love. And it's a little different for me. It's a necklace. It has its content is really a personal one. I had one of my favorite cousins did endure for a long time a abusive relationship. And I think it was hard for her and her generation to, one, recognize what abuse was, and to also how to end that, how to leave that. Also with the type of upbringing that she had. She's a very Catholic upbringing. So when you make that promise, it's a sacrament, and it's meant for life. And so I think it was very difficult for her and a woman of her generation to break that cycle. So I went with the necklace, and I used sort of like symbolism would be garage sale or tag sale tags. And on those tags, as you can see, I have portraits of photographs of physically abused women. And so I'm making that connection to something personal for me, something that's a social issue, an unchecked issue. It's as old as mankind. And I also put her wedding picture. She was a young bride, only 19 at the time. And as I said, so there's a personal and social connection on that piece. I think as we're going down the hall, what you're going to see next is three pieces. One, again, is I'm going to say a Greek Roman type urn. I really like to make handles, so you can see that on those. It's wheel thrown. It's mid-fire stoneware clay, and on it I have a swan. Again, I'm calling it untitled until I really feel comfortable with the title. The swan, again, a swan mates for life, and so it's a lone swan, and so that has some personal symbolism to it. But also, it also harks back to when I was a child. My mom loved to go to antique stores, and I loved going with her. And I still love going to vintage shops and antique stores. And very often I will pick up small figurines, as you can see in a lot of the pieces. And so, it's a double thing. The lone swan and the harking back to childhood, seeking those connections. So the past to the present. Also on that back wall in the gallery is a platter. And I believe I've titled it Domestic Duties. And on it, again, I was born in 57. So 1957, like we're moving into like a heavy change decade in the 60s, lots of social change, lots of social awareness. And so those figures that I've hand painted on that platter are women of the day, that kind of style in their dress. Oh, around the clock sexism, I call it, because again, harking back to gender identity and gender roles, very defined. And I mean, I remember my mom she pretty much was a housewife till she returned to the workforce when I was about maybe 10, 11. But I remember her wearing dresses that were like mid-calf and pearls, even on a weekday in the house. And probably, like the tail end of men, even working class men, maybe wearing a suit, not around the house, but there was these standards of dress and how both men and women would be and how they would interact. So around the clock, sexism, and then I just have the days of the week on it. So a ceramic platter and earthenware. And I think as you go around the bend, you're going to see a raku vase again. I really like that type of firing. And have you all seen that? I mean, if you want to get up and walk around, you can, but I assume you're in and out the hallways and you've seen it. Heads up.
Yeah, everybody's seen it, yeah.
Okay, okay, good. Anyway, it's again, I like the vintage shops. I'm reminiscent. I like antiquity. So the Doll's Head, and again, I like to work in series. That's one of a series of 6. And I know you're all Philadelphia folks, so you know where the Eastern State Penitentiary is. I had submitted the larger installment piece for, they always um, sponsor a exhibition of contemporary artists at the penitentiary. So if you haven't been, I highly suggest you go. And it's competitive. I put in my piece, and it really was dealing with uh, prisons and compulsory prison sentences, and what I started to become more interested in is like whenever I do a piece, I do research behind it. And so I was starting to research behind it. And sometimes when families are broken up, when there's no tolerance laws, both mother and father or a single parent is incarcerated, and that leaves a family broken, children broken. And so what happens very often is a grandparent, an aunt, someone picks up the ball on these children while mom and dad are incarcerated. So they kind of fall between the cracks. And, it was really something I hadn't thought of deeply until I went to the penitentiary, and I was looking at, learning about the penal system of yesteryears and the penal system of today. And then during my research, I came across this idea of uh, justified reform, and then came across the stories, which were heartbreaking, about children whose parents are incarcerated, and then either they're going to go into the foster system, or sometimes, like I said, very often a grandparent will pick it up. But a grandparent's their means of support, their income is nil, and now they're picking up 2, 3 children to take care of and feed. So the piece with the Doll's Head is one of a series. And what I did is, I'm hoping that you've all played musical chairs once in your lifetime. I had these raku pieces on small children's chairs, and many dolls' heads on many ragu pieces. And so it's again a call from the past penal institutions to the present, and my personal past of playing musical chairs and interest in ceramics. So it all dovetails together. And I think another piece, I have 2 colanders. I did start off as a functional potter, but a woman needs a room of her own, and I have a voice. And so through my art, it's a way of me expressing my voice. So in the colanders, the one is at the end of the hall, is Innocence Remembered. Sometimes I call it Innocence Strained. Being a suburban sort of country child, it was really a thrill to go to my grandmother's house in Bayonne, New Jersey, because it's a small city, and I could hear trains and traffic, and she would let me sit on her fire escape, and I could see the Statue of Liberty. But she had a china cabinet filled with all kinds of goodies, and one of those is the small cherub inside that colander, and just some other pieces that, again, are reminiscent of growing up, my childhood. And I call it Innocence Strained or Innocence Remembered, because what we remember as a child sometimes is either not remembered clearly or remembered differently than as an adult. So a colander lets things through, but it also remembers things. And the other colander, I think I call it domestic duties. And I loved my mom dearly, but she was a woman of her time. And I recall from the time, and my sister can testify to it, if you liked art, you should be an art teacher. My sister likes to cook. You should be a home ec teacher because your number one job as a woman was going to be a mom. And a teacher was a wonderful job, and it certainly is. And she was right to be a mom because you're off when your children are off. Your school day is when their day is. But she was a woman of her times, and the gender identity, the gender roles were definitely defined, at least in my upbringing. I can't speak for every woman in every situation, but in mine for sure. So domestic duties has a bride and groom, and my mom was a devout Catholic, so there's a rosary bead in there. She was very talented. I think I have a little mini sewing machine. She would sew our dresses without a pattern. She would sew our dolls the same clothing as our that we were wearing. So again, it's a nostalgic, but it also is a commentary on gender identity and and strict gender roles. I think when you go around the corner, we have the doll head from the incarceration series, and then you have the Silence Among Us. And again, that's a series of many masks that I've made in the style of Raku and all different types of ethnic faces because there's this silence between us, between ethnicities. I think we have more in common than we have apart. As I've always said to my students, and empanada is a ravioli, is a pierogi. The great homogenizer is food, but we have more in common with each other than we have apart. So the silence between us. And I believe the final piece around the end of the gallery is, again, a piece from a series. It's called my Antebellum series, and making connections from the past to the present. I made what I think is a representation of a type of tea service that one would see at the plantations in the South during antebellum pre-Civil War. And I call it chained because, and as you see, there's a chained motif on those pieces. And I think sometimes we're chained to our past. And so that is one of a series that I worked on, connecting the present to the past in the Antebellum series. And I think I've touched on everything.
Yeah, that was
I mean, at this point, if you have any questions that you'd want to ask, I certainly will welcome them. Yes.
And you say what your subject matter, you say it'd be like social commentary,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And and to like relate to some of like what your work does, like the Anwar, just like how like in the photos like you put like the people being abused.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've actually as a when I was 14, I actually became aware of like stuff like that through like a comic.
Oh,
Basically, basically Spider-Man's bully, Flash Thompson, was abused by his own father when he was a kid,
right.
drunk.
I know
I
sometimes it's right under our nose and we don't know it. You know what I mean? We don't know what goes on behind our neighbors' doors sometimes.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I cut you off. So tell me about this comic.
So basically, for a time, Flash Thompson was like bonded with the Venom symbiote, and like what I learned from it was like this was the first time I've heard of it. I read it in my Kindle, like I think it was either issue 4, like something. But anyway, like we learned about his story, like how his dad like coached him and how he was just verbally and physically abusive because of how he got drunk.
Mm-hmm.
So like the series itself is good. There are some parts that are a little bit, but it's good. And it has
Uh-huh.
something that relates to that. I call it like toxic love, and I made it when I was about 24 years old in my sculpting class. It was like a. Is it okay if I like show to you?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is it close by?
It's in my thing.
Yeah, okay, good. We'll get everybody else. Anybody else have questions?
Not questions, but I do love your work. I enjoyed walking up and down the halls the past little bit and looking at your work. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks. Thanks so much. Yeah, I really, I mean, it's in my DNA. I have to do it. I have to make it. And that's why I'm so pleased that Professor Flynn invited me to show at the gallery, because to me, that's full circle. Yeah, I can make it, but to go full circle and share it and show it. And even though not everyone maybe knows the context or the content, that's the important thing I think about a lot of art, is um, to make us think, and to think about connections and what do you think this artist is trying to say. So thank you. So you found a piece for me.
Yeah. Hold on. I'm gonna. This is pretty much what I was talking about. This is called toxic love.
Oh
And-
yeah.
And if you can see, like the lady's got like she's more darker than the guy, and she's
Hmm.
got like a black eye.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Very neat. Very neat. And I mean, by giving it the title, you're taking it a step further. You're giving a hint to the viewer of what your content is.
Right.
And that's why sometimes I'll leave things untitled and think about, where I'm going with the title. So yeah, bravo, nice piece.
Thank you.
Thanks, AJ.
I'm not proud.
Anybody else comment? Questions about process or anything?
Yeah.
I just read your plate. I thought it was the one with the chess piece. I really thought it was about abuse.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, because of I punched your mother in the nose, right? And then,
Yeah.
and I think that's kind of like the initial was for me reminiscing as a childhood in the way we used to select,
Right.
parts of a game. I don't know if anybody does that anymore. It's like one potato, two potato. And then I became a parent, and the big catchword for my first daughter was timeout. You gave your child a timeout if they misbehaved. It didn't work real well with me because she didn't sit still. I said, go on the pink chair for a while, and she'd get out of the pink chair. And then I said, I don't know what to do with this timeout. So it came from there. But then recently I was looking at it because I kind of revisited this piece. And I was thinking the same thing. It not so much abuse, but just like power, and also I just experienced so much aggression on the highways anymore, and I'm like, wow, you know, can't you hold back a second? You're going to punch me in the nose because I'm not going for a right on red fast enough. So there's all kinds of things. Things change.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah. Can you hear my mic?
Yes, we
I
can hear
can.
it.
Okay, awesome. I actually wanted to hear more about the I Can't Breathe piece.
Uh-huh.
Specifically, well, to start at least, specifically your construction technique for it.
Yeah, well, it's thrown on the potter's wheel, and raku firing, as I had mentioned, is not traditionally done in the kinds of electric kilns that you might have in school.
Mm.
They're usually it's done outside, out in the outside
Oh.
environment, and it's the pieces are actually low fire glaze. Like, you're probably using, those of you at the campus, I suspect you're using earthenware glazes like Cone 05 temperatures. So the temperature is the same as that. But the piece is actually removed from the kiln red hot with tongs,
Ow.
and it's robbed of, at that point, it has oxygen, and then you put it in some kind of a container. Some people will put it in a hole in the ground. I mean, it's an ancient technique. And then the piece is robbed of oxygen, and that gives it that surface effect that you're looking at. I tend to use a clear crackle, but raku glazes do come in colors. I just love the crackle. And then as far as the lids, I mean, again, the lid was made on the potter's wheel. And as far as the small faces, I pick those up in probably Amazon or Etsy. And then they might have been candy molds, for chocolate candy. So those came, and I pressed the clay in and popped out the faces and attached.
Yeah, it's very profound. I think that was the first piece I noticed when I was walking around looking at everything. I mean, as soon as you see something that says "I can't breathe," it's synonymous with what happened to George Floyd and what continues to
Right,
happen to African
right.
Americans at the hands of the police. It's
Oh,
terrible.
thank you. Thanks. Actually, like I said, I made it at the time of Eric Gardner, who
Right.
said, "I can't breathe." And then kind of tragic that we hear the same words again, how many years later? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's sad and it's disturbing.
You guys know Eric Gardner's story? No, okay, he was in Staten Island, and he, very large man, and he was selling cigarettes, and the police targeted him, knocked him down, and held him so he couldn't breathe, and he said, "I can't breathe." And,
Right.
it was really in the news, so.
Yeah, repeatedly, and the same with George Floyd. I think what it really is calling for is that I think not an easy task to be a police officer in any setting, not an easy job for a police officer to be in an urban setting. I think what we're seeing is there has to be a call for more training, more understanding, how to de-escalate
De-escalate.
a
Yeah.
situation, and I just think that that is the takeaway, among other things, that there has to be, you know, several years, maybe and if we could, of an MSW riding along on calls, a master's in social work, someone that can de-escalate a situation, because situations seem to escalate real fast.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Questions? No? Thank you so much, Colleen. This is great.
Well, thank you. I am regretful. I like to go full circle and actually be in the gallery with you and walking through, but fender benders happen. And I have no car. So thank you so much for being here. And again, thank you for having me as an exhibiting artist at Holy Family.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I guess we're ready to leave. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.